Good evening, everyone. Our speaker tonight will be Brenda Golianu. I think most of you know her. She's been at Kannon for a number of years, I think over 30 years. So her talk today will be called Disappointment. Welcome, Brenda.
Hi. Let me put this on the gallery so I can see all of you. Good evening. So I thought a good place to start, we enter Buddhism with the desire for happiness. And often one of the predominant symptoms that bring people to practice is unhappiness. They're dissatisfied, they're sad, angry perhaps, and disappointed. And we all have had these feelings, and it's we can't help, our minds are designed to build pictures of the future, of potential events and things that will transpire, expectations. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. And we build an image of how something will be. A trip, a beloved trip, a movie, a get-together, friendship, a career, how we're going to be passing a springtime and a summer in this case. We anticipate events that will happen, how it will unfold, the feelings that we might have. And in some things, sometimes things come to pass just as we imagined that they would. And our desires are completely fulfilled. And sometimes it's even more than we've imagined, with many hidden elements of beauty and pleasure and new discoveries. And it is quite marvelous. And sometimes the twists and turns of life may lead to that event or the desired outcome as something that doesn't happen or happens in a way that we didn't anticipate. And we experience disappointment and sometimes sadness or grief. Buddha said that life is suffering. That statement has always seemed a little bit pessimistic to me. Maybe for me, I feel like, really, all of it, really suffering, and there's pain of this and pain of that, and it's all pain, Now, I work in pain management, so a lot of my life is about pain, but it just seems like all pain, gosh, there's definitely suffering inherent in life. And it is unavoidable, however. And just like there's also joy in life, and it will find us, sometimes in the strangest places when we least expect it. But today I want to focus on what we do and what happens for us at the moment when we register that particular sensation of disappointment. It might be first a thought. Oh, this is not what I expected. We all know that. This is kind of weird. I can't leave the house? For how long? Then there's a growing feeling of unease as we try to come to grips with a new reality. Perhaps a feeling of heaviness in our stomach or our hearts. Perhaps some sadness or some fear. Sometimes this feeling might tie into other times that we've been disappointed. That time when we didn't get something, the present that we wanted, or the grade, or the boyfriend, or the job. It might all mush together into a big old feeling of disappointment. Just, life is terrible. I knew this would happen. What do I do about it? It's often tempting for many of us to kind of shut the doors of perception, close the doors, stop listening, turn off, stop talking, stop reaching out to others, stopping your activities. And if that kind of reaction continues for a long time, it can have its own consequences. We sometimes refer to that as depression. Or we might continue our activities, but a little more cautiously, looking out for things that might signal that we will be disappointed again and try to avoid them. Whatever I do, I'm not going to try that again because last time it didn't work so well. Right? We all know, we've all been there. Sometimes this happens a little unconsciously as our mind, scans for those possible threats to our well-being and tries to help us avoid them even outside of our awareness. So that friend or brother or teacher or parent that disappointed us continues to travel with us in a way on the journey of life, determining how we then see and experience our lives. Sometimes if we engage in this practice a lot, our lives might become smaller and smaller. So we take fewer and fewer chances and are very, very cautious. Our Buddhist practice offers us another alternative. On the cushion, we learn to breathe, breathing in and breathing out. And when we do that a lot, we might notice something, that the breath that we breathe in is a little different than the breath that we breathe out. That no two breaths are alike. Sometimes they're stronger, sometimes more tentative, sometimes deeper, sometimes barely perceptible. Our breath is always there, but never quite the same. Sometimes we forget to breathe and have to remember. Oh yes, breathe. Sometimes it comes quite rapidly. Oh yes, slow down a little. And along with the breath, we might notice that our thoughts also differ moment to moment. Even when we're in pain, it is never quite the same pain. It might have different tones, implications, different times. It gets stronger and weaker, might go away a little bit. There's a practice that's taught in Tibet called Tonglen, where you are taught to ride the breath, to breathe in the pain of yourself and humanity, and then breathe out love. Now, to some of us, this might sound like a little bit like denial, which, I've been guilty of more than once in my life. Everything's okay, let's just pretend everything's okay. We're not gonna. And that can work sometimes, but really it's negating a feeling that we truly feel that pain. Denial is sort of a more superficial way of experiencing that, where we don't really let the pain touch us. But Tonglen is actually not about denial. It's about really feeling the pain and allowing it to touch you, and yet choosing to respond from a place of love and compassion. It's a little bit different. It can offer a respite, the breath. It's taught sometimes in mindfulness-based stress reduction courses at hospitals. And the breath can offer a respite by being something that you always have with you, very handy, the breath, and use it to soften your thinking, soften the tightness of our thoughts. We can still hold a thought. No one will take it away. They're ours as long as we wish to keep them, but they're held a little more loosely. Dogen talks about opening the hand of thought. So it's held in an open hand. It's not clutched. You still have it. You can look at it. Decide. You want to keep it? You want to get rid of it? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll keep it for now and think about it. But that allows other options. We introduces some other options. So disappointment can be a great teacher because it can teach us exactly what we are holding very tightly to. It can allow us to gently release the grip on those thoughts and relax into the ground of being. Les mentioned last week, walking with our feet on the ground for an authentic life. When our feet are on the ground, we're very steady and stable. Even if we fall, it's not so great a distance, just to the ground. We know how to get up. It's okay. And when we walk, we feel every step of the way. We know what direction we're going because we know where our feet are pointing. So this is an invitation, if you wish to take it, to embrace those areas of your life where you might feel some disappointment and allow them to teach you about yourself and what you are holding on to. And this doesn't mean that you give up that goal or expectation or hope, but perhaps to hold it a little more loosely, to feel and understand how you are holding it, what it means for you. What is your intention in designing that goal or expectation? And in those moments, a delicate balance begins to be possible. The past can meet the present and the future. You missed the appointment you had with your expectation or hope, but maybe you can still be right on time for today's appointment, the minute right in front of you. Or you can make a new appointment with the moment that's coming up in the next minute. And who knows what those will hold. The event of disappointment allows you to go deeper into your intention and ask yourself, what is it that I truly wanted and expected and why? Is it still important? How or how not? And you soften into that consideration. And as time goes on, you might find you're not so easily disappointed. You see things, some of which you like and some of which you may not, but you can remain centered in your presence nonetheless. So I invite you to consider and share some of, maybe you have had events that have been disappointing for you in some way, and maybe they have had some contribution to your life that turned out to be positive or not, or negative. Either one is okay. So I invite you to share what may be some of your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. So we're now open for questions. Anyone, or comments? Any questions or comments? Just feel free to come to Gasho or raise your physical or digital hand. Chris?
Thank you, Brenda, for your talk. You see people, like you said, professionally as a physician and help them with their pain. I'm sure, or I'm not sure, should ask you, I'm going to guess that most or all of them come in with a physical description, maybe the belly aches or whatever. But maybe I just wondered if you would comment on maybe in your experience, how much of that actually comes from the mind causing the body ache, or there's actually, some other explanation for the physical ailment.
So, pain is always experienced at the end of the game in your mind, because that's where you register the pain, right? So all body pain is included in the mind. The mind also has certain ways of amplifying that pain, for example. So states like sleeplessness, if you don't sleep, you will experience physical pain as more intense. We all know that it's a different, if you bump your toe, it's a different experience in the morning and late at night. And also if you're frustrated or anxious or sad or worried, that pain will be perceived also more, you know, severely. So if you're seeing that pain as an anticipation of something bad, meaning something bad, then it will be stronger than if you're feeling like, oh, I have this pain, but it means something good. You know, childbirth is one of those, although childbirth is still painful no matter how you look at it for most people. I think it always is a combined experience. That's really you can't sort it out. You can maybe try to parse it out percentually, you know, this much percent, but you really can't. It's like, it's a mush. It's a mush. So the best way to treat it is from all fronts. And then just ask yourself, what's the best way? What's the best means of therapy, I guess. Does that answer your question? It's never separate.
Wakelam? There you are.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you for the talk. I thought it's very relevant to me and maybe to other people as well. What I like about you is the way you use the word, make a new appointment. Because when you say new appointment, usually I think of maybe a scheduled appointment, those kind of appointment. And the way you use it, I think is give me a different way of looking at something.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good, because what I would normally do is I would say maybe make a different expectation. And you use the word appointment, which is in line with disappointment. So I think that is very relevant. And I think it's a good way of like giving a different spin. I mean, so that we can look at it a different way. I think that's a good thing that you introduce in this talk. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Diane? Hang on, let me unmute you. Let's see. Diane, can you unmute
I
yourself?
have to unmute myself.
There you are.
I think.
There you are. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, we just lost you. Can you try holding the space bar down while you're talking? Just hold it down. Talk?
No, we had you for a minute.
We had you for a minute and then we lost you.
Again.
Okay, can
And
you?
let go. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, stay, whatever you're doing, cross your fingers. Keep talking. Yeah, we're good, good.
Yeah, okay. Where were we? I'm so disappointed. It really is about expectations, isn't it? I think that's what messes me up more than anything, is having expectations, and often too high expectations of myself and my perfectionism. And sometimes it absolutely paralyzes me if I try something new, if it's tennis or dancing or a new endeavor. I don't realize it right away, but after a while I get discouraged, and it's probably because I've set up certain standards that somehow I'm just not meeting. And it's really a struggle, you know, even trying to apply the practice to that and being accepting. It is so difficult. So you've given me some very good food for thought, but I'm not quite sure how I get through the little steps to let go of some of the high expectations I have.
Um, you know, you still
My
there?
phone is ringing out. Yeah, I'm here.
You know, I understand what you mean, and I have some of the same disease. I think the only thing I can think of is that sometimes you have to use a lot of humor and kind of go to the opposite extreme, like apply radical, you know, change in expectations, right? So if you're learning how to play tennis, you know, I will hit the ball with the racket. You know, somebody who was trying to help me get over, you know, writing paralysis when I had to do a lot of articles. They were like, okay, the first draft has to be in English. Here, you know, you have to write a page in English. Can you do that? I said, I think so. I think so. And then like leave it at that. Like leave it at that. Don't sit down and write 2 pages. Just write that 1 page in English and walk away. You know. And then that can kind of help to reset your brain a little bit. Going, wait, this is like, what am I doing here? What am I? You know. So it's an invitation to look at, you know, but don't be afraid to chop those expectations down. Tenfold, 100-fold until it gets ridiculous, and then you can build it back up, you know, to something realistic.
That's a good suggestion.
You know,
Sort of chunking it down in little pieces, maybe.
Yeah, just throw it all away. See what happens.
Thank you.
Craig?
Thank you for your talk, Brenda. Ooh, I can see myself big. I'm going to stop that.
I spotlighted you.
I don't need that. When you first offered the question to think about things in your life that were disappointing, and I was kind of running an inventory, going, no, like, can't really think of anything very specific. And then as people started talking, kind of had a complete turnaround and realized that actually I'm in an almost perpetual state of disappointment with myself for things I haven't even failed at yet. It's like kind of living in the future and anticipating the ways in which things like might not pan out right. And in some ways that's like, especially in a work context, it's part of what the thinking involves, right? You're trying to anticipate future things and avoid those risks. But when it translates into a kind of feeling in advance of disappointment in yourself, then that can be unhelpful and quite crippling. I don't think I have the latitude in that working context to lower the bar in the same way. And, you know, today I'm just going to switch my computer on. There are already expectations set at a slightly higher bar. But yeah, it did make me realize, and I think like the relationship between that and the practice and your I guess engagement in the here and now, not kind of living in the past or in the future as much as just kind of living in this moment and being present with that. There seems lots of relevance there. The other thing that came to mind in terms of disappointment, you talked about being disappointed about having to stay at home and how long is this going to last. I think from the kind of coronavirus perspective, yes, there are like personal disappointments in terms of loss of freedoms, but also I think looking around at the way that the situation is being handled, it's like one large scale disappointment after another, either from, you know, people who are elected or in positions of power to do good things about it, or the world at large and their kind of behavior. And, you know, it's very easy to be disappointed in other people in almost any direction. And I guess in some cases that's warranted. And then perhaps in many other cases, it can be a lack of empathy or understanding. And in fact, I was reading an article this week that was talking about how it's pretty unhelpful to be like mask shaming or distance shaming individual people, because everybody in that moment is telling themselves a story for some reason about why it's okay or why it's safe. And that the more constructive place to focus the kind of the criticism or the challenge to do better is around the broader clarity of how we should be behaving and how we should be addressing this crisis.
Right. Right.
Yeah, very different focal points for disappointment. Both relevant to practice, but in very different ways.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's very insightful. Remind me of, I think Mark Twain said something like, I've worried about many, many things in my life, hundreds of things, a few of which have actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Linda.
Dave?
I guess I have a slightly different sort of oddball example of disappointment in my life, but it relates somewhat more directly to my Zen practice. And let me say at the beginning, I'm not saying I'm disappointed with my Zen practice, quite the opposite, but it's what came before my Zen practice. I first became really aware of Zen and started paying attention to it and reading about it in my early 20s. And I didn't start sitting until my early 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, I looked back on those 30 years and I was very disappointed with myself. And quickly following this huge rush of disappointment was a sense of the total irony of sitting in Zazen, feeling disappointed with yourself in the past. If sitting is about what you're doing in this moment, then sitting in anguish about what happened over the last 3 decades is totally ridiculous. Even more than that, one thing that crossed my mind about this, many of you are probably familiar with the old saying that the wise man thinks of the Tao and carries it constantly in mind. The average man thinks of the Tao and hears of the Tao and thinks of it from time to time. The foolish person hears of the Tao and laughs out loud. And without that laughter, the Tao would not be what it is. And as I look back over those 30 years, in some sense, I can be disappointed that they were wasted, but in another sense, if it weren't those 30 years, my practice today would not be what it is.
Thank you. As somebody who took 20 years to sew a rakusu, I understand exactly what you mean. Yeah. I think there's also, the thing about when you're young, there's a lot of things in this society you have to do. Like you have to survive, you have to get a job. I think you're gonna kind of say, okay, am I gonna go be a monk? And if I'm not gonna live full time as a monk, then I have to earn a living. And how do I do that? What am I gonna do? How do I raise my family and all this? These are all, and so those are tough questions and they require, a lot of hands-on. And I definitely, I see my kids, I've wondered about like, should I teach my kids to meditate? And I tried. And throughout the high school years and even now college years, I look at them and they see me meditating, and that's an important part of my life. And they have a cushion. I give them each a cushion. And I go to visit my daughter with a young grandchild, and the cushion is up in the closet. It has a prominent place up in the closet on the top shelf there. And I asked her about it. I said, "What's the deal with the cushion up there? Shouldn't that be down here?" She's like, "Not yet, not yet." So, you know, you have to respect that. She knows there's a cushion up there. It's still there. It traveled with her to New York, traveled back. But it's in her mind. It's in there. And I think it still plays a role, even if we don't sit, that we still know that sitting is there and that, you know, it's important. But I don't think you were doing nothing those 30 years, is what I.
Hi, Brenda.
Hey, Umar.
Hi, Umar.
Can I ask a question? I just had a comment.
Of course.
I've recently come to realize that, you know, everything that we do, wherever we go, whatever we do, and this has come after a long time of sitting, is that, you know, we think we're journeying outward, but we're not. We're really journeying inward. And you were talking about disappointment, and I remember I'd taken an anthropology class, and I said to the teacher, I can't write. He said, well, write that down.
Hmm.
I said, what do you mean? He said, well, just write that down and keep writing it till your brain gives up and something will come. And so, you know, it's again, you know, that sort of a feeling. He was saying, let go of this thing that you have in your head saying, I can't and I can. Just do it. You know, sit down and start doing something. And I think looking back recently, just came back recently while I was listening to you.
Mm.
And it wasn't even that he would say, write on, it was just this exercise that he had us do on the sidewalk with the chalk. So I can't write, you know, so it was just like we couldn't get attached to what we were writing. So, and, you know, people were going to walk on it, and, you know, it wasn't something that was, you know, we could put aside and go back to. It's, you know, so it was just like, that's why I was thinking, this is interesting that, you know, all of these ideas that we have in our head are really about, oh, I'm traveling, you know, I'm doing this and I'm traveling this and I'm grabbing that and I'm living up to somebody's expectations and not living up to somebody's expectation. If you let go of all of that, just do what you need to do, you know. And as I said, you know, the other thing that I've really, it's an observation that I've come to realize that it's like we are all traveling inward, not outward. We keep thinking, you know, it's the opposite journey. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That's very beautiful. Thank you.
I have a comment. It came to mind with Diane's question and how you gave her good advice about, I guess, like celebrating the smaller successes, right? And I realized that the way we think about the very small things has a tremendous impact on our life. And it's both in work life as well as in spirituality. So, for example, in work interviews, when you're interviewing people, one of the top skills that you really check for is, can they take a big problem and break it down into really small problems and just solve the small basic ones before tackling the whole big thing. And I realized that actually it's in the small things in my life that make a difference in the quality of my life as well. For example, just in the morning, you know, making breakfast, and I'm like, I could be eating breakfast and checking email at the same time, but when I say, oh, I'm gonna just sit and just eat and enjoy the quiet morning for 10 minutes, it changes my whole day, you know? So attitude towards the small things. And similarly, when I'm under a lot of stress and I feel like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I have too many things to do and I can't do it, sometimes I'll just say, okay, just do one small thing, unload the dishwasher. And then I like celebrate, I didn't do nothing, I unloaded the dishwasher. And in a way it like builds confidence, right? And so I find that like our attitude towards the small things we do like completely changes our state of mind and kind of the direction we go down from there. So anyway, that was what I was thinking of throughout your talk.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's kind of, I think it's very true. I also find that in my life, especially when things are all over the place and you're unsatisfied with on many different fronts. It's focusing on something that you can control, you can manage, can feel really helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Vanessa? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Oh, same thing. The great view back. I was just thinking about disappointments in the context of relationships, and especially when we were sort of talking about how, I mean, disappointments are basically framed by expectations, and if we're disappointed in a relationship, I think it's very hard sometimes to sort of separate the disappointment from overly high expectations. And I sort of think of like when my daughter was much younger, and I really struggled, like I think through her younger toddler years, and I would sort of come home, you know, I'd be at home at the end of every day and just fall into bed and be like, oh, I'm doing everything wrong, you know, like it just, everything feels like such a struggle with her. And maybe because I was so tired, but it took a while to dawn on me that it was my expectations that, you know, that I just had this certain picture in my mind of like, you know, we're going to go to the supermarket now and she is going to be quiet and you know, not need to have her nappy changed in the middle of the shopping and not start screaming for chocolate. And you know, I kind of, and I realized that I was like pathologically just expecting, like I you know, I wanted everything to go so well every time. And it was that was really causing the suffering, because I'd see other mothers who are very well adapted to that kind of uncertainty that children bring, you know, and that they could jump very easily from one difficult situation to another. And I think I'm getting better at it now, but I think it took me a really long time to get there. And I think that realization that you know, it wasn't her, like she was just doing her baby thing. Like, you know, it was me expecting that, not even expecting, but you know, imagining that she'd act in a certain way. And then I think of sort of there's like, you know, there's a lot of child discipline advice that's given out where people say, be clear with your expectations to children, you know. So, you know, it's very fair to be clear. So at the beginning of dinner, you know, I'm going to express my expectation to my daughter that I expect her to sit on a chair, to not throw food across the room, to, you know, finish at least half of what's on her plate and to eat her greens. And I, you know, it's that sort of clarity that I think is it. I think it's a, in a more subtle way, I think it's a really good habit to get into, even with adult relationships. You know, perhaps not being quite so sort of heavy-handed about it, but I think if, you know, even if our expectations are strange and bizarre and almost embarrassing, I think that if they can be communicated with trust, you know, the people that we love and people whom we trust, I think it can help mitigate a lot of those issues. Because when I think of, you know, perhaps I can handle disappointment by lowering my expectations, to me that just feels so jaded. It's so disappointing in itself, you know, the idea that one would have a picture that was sort of lower than the ideal. But then perhaps on the other hand, we're talking more about just not entering into fantasy in the first place, you know, about sort of not having the kinds of expectations that build a sort of rosiness in the future, but just having the wisdom to expect what is achievable and what is real.
Yeah. And I guess I totally understand what you mean, and I don't want to you know, I don't think we should lower our standards necessarily, you know, because we want to reach out for the best that we can for both our kids, ourselves. But I think being able to see what we are doing, you know, and hold it so that we're not married to it, I guess, or you know, are holding it consciously, right? So you might hold the vegetables in, say, okay, 50% of the meal and the greens, okay, but if the greens don't get eaten, you know, you're disappointed, but you're okay. Like, you understand. You say, okay, I'm disappointed that you didn't eat the vegetables, you know, but you're not like, why your life crashes apart like it did at the supermarket back a few years ago, right? You're like, ah!
I've cried in I've literally shed tears in supermarkets, like
I can understand. Kids are our greatest teachers. They will break all expectations.
Right? Yeah.
For sure.
It's, yeah, I always feel like that the outcome was much more kind of frustration with myself than it was maybe disappointment. But if I'm to sort of look at it closely, but yeah, yeah, it's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Les?
You talked a bit about expectations. Do you think the expectations or the amount of expectations that we carry around with us these days in the modern world, you think it's always been like that, or is this uptick in expectations something new? What's your feeling about that?
Interesting. Yeah, I think there might be something new because of media, you know, television and advertising. You know, we're fed a lot of information by the media, and I think that wasn't quite so true before. You had more, your comparison was maybe the people around you or the stories that you heard from people a little bit further away, but it wasn't so much like television. Often, you know, you look at families and they're all happy and everybody's successful, and someone practices 5 times and is a perfect kung fu master, you know, on TV. And so it makes it look as if it's very easy, you know, and it doesn't take a lot of work. And so I think that there is a lot less emphasis on, like, things should just happen, should be easy. Relationships should just be easy, shouldn't require work. You know, there's sort of this more of that expectation. There's less distress tolerance or frustration tolerance.
So does that mean you kind of feel that we are trying to live up to other people's expectations?
Yeah, I think we bring those into our heads, you know, and we're not aware that we're adopting a standard that came from somewhere. Maybe we saw it on TV or saw it in the newspaper or something. We thought, oh, that's what I should do. And we don't really consider, you know, is this realistic for me, for my life? You know, someone said this should happen, and does that make sense? And you know, that's where I appreciate Buddhism so much. It says, you know, find your own salvation with diligence. You know, figure it out. You know, Buddha was very encouraging that we figure out the path, what makes sense for us. And so this is an important teaching that we're faced with so many problems in this world, outwards and inwards. And charting, I think, a path forward really relies on us being very true to what's going on, to ourselves and what we see, and kind of coming back to that authentic experience. There's not going to be a formula for things. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick?
Hey, Brenda. I really liked your talk, and I had a question. I'm wondering if you might be willing to elaborate on what might be the difference between disappointment versus dissatisfaction. And if I can preface my question a little bit, one of the things that I really gathered from your talk is that when we look at things with an attitude of disappointment, it's kind of like the period at the end of a sentence or a dead end at the end of a road. And, you know, the times in my life that I've had that attitude of disappointment, I feel like I've kind of closed off what, you know, people might consider Suzuki's beginner's mind. Whereas the times in life that I've kind of looked at similar situations with an attitude of dissatisfaction, I've actually kind of didn't hit a dead end. I hit a fork in the road. Or I didn't hit the period at the end of the sentence. I kind of hit a semicolon, you know. And I'm just wondering is there a difference in that attitude? And if so, how do we navigate from that attitude of disappointment to the attitude of dissatisfaction?
Well, it's interesting. I love the semicolon and the period. If you look at, you know, some of the literature in both the Buddha and Dogen and others, you know, Buddha was, when he was meditating with his buddies on the river and practicing asceticism, and he was disappointed with the fact that he, you know, it wasn't working out for him, and he left. So that would be a period. You know, he went a different way. Dogen also was disappointed with the practice of Buddhism in Japan, right? He said this is not it, and so he took off to China to search for, you know, true Buddhist practice. And he was even there disappointed with many of the monasteries he went to. He's like, no, this is not it. This is not it. So it was all periods. But what was interesting was, you know, what did he do at that point when he found something? He's like, this is not what I wanted. And he kept searching. He kept saying, okay, then what? So in a sense, he made it into a fork. You know, he made those disappointments into forks by continuing his search. And I think that's, honestly, if there's nothing else from today's talk, it's that what is your when things are not what you expect, what do? Do you just give up, or do you say, which was not what I expected, all right, what next? You know, and you kind of, you know, revisit your intention, go back to the core of what you're really trying to do or be or look for, and then regroup and go in a different direction, maybe sometimes, a different approach.
Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you.
May?
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, May.
I missed your talk because my husband and I were busy with negotiating with my kids for video game time. we have to got a new contract, so there's expectations, and then but anyhow, but expectation, and then I just briefly catch something here and there. I guess doesn't matter. So I will catch up your talk later. But expectation definitely something that I've been pondering a lot, quite a lot. And then there's two things just come up in my mind. One is future of mind. The mind of future. Okay, so I'm wondering whether this expectation is associated with the mind of future, which is according to Diamond Sutra, which is, well, the Buddha doesn't want us to have mind of future. You know, mind of past, mind of present, mind of future. So that part I don't know. Second is I think maybe several months ago I bumped into a talk by a Stanford professor who is psychology professor, and he just revealed a very shocking fact. He said, I think he published a book called Forgive for Good, Forgive for Love. Mm-hmm. I bet you might know him. Mm-hmm. So he actually said that there's a 40% of a Stanford student right now got anxiety or depression because things doesn't go on their way because they have such high expectation on themselves. Mm-hmm. Because especially like the place, you know, you were in, that place is everybody expect you to be Larry Page, you know, or how come you're not the number one in the whole world? So, and also, you know, Silicon Valley, you know, high expectations. And so just these two things come on my mind. One is the mind of future. The other is this whole thing. And then especially this singular place we're living, and then we live and breathe every day. So just want to hear some of your thoughts. Yeah.
Sure. So I guess a few different things. I think this is a special place and time, certainly in Silicon Valley. We really have, I think, the smartest from many different continents, you know, are all here, and at Stanford, certainly, you know, students from all different walks of life and situations and cultures are all thrown together, and they're all really, really good. And it's a scary place where you find out that, you know, there's still a bell curve. And even among the very, very good, there's still those who are the top 10, 20, 30%, and, you know, you might be under the 50%. So it can be really scary, really scary. And also the pace of things, and kids, we're not taught to manage our own minds very well in high school or at all in cultures. I think that is really necessary. I think how to manage your mind should be part of high school curriculum, my opinion. It's like a runaway car, you know. Is it like a car that you don't know how to put the gas to, you know, how to operate the gas pedal and a brake? We give the kids all the skills except how to drive, you know. So how to drive their minds. I think this is important. So I think that's part of the problem. And they have very fast cars. They can think well, you know. So I think we need a little of the mind of the future. You can't. I think the times of Buddha relied on, you know, his community relied on begging for a living, right? So he brought his monks into a certain place, living in the present, You walk out with your bowl and you get what you get. That's not realistic now in terms of, it's going to be hard to make a living in the valley, you know, and what are you going to do about the kids and their videos, right? So you have to hard to get them new video games. But so we have to have a balance that you need some future mind. But I think the question is, how do you not get carried away with future mind? You know, how do you not only live in the future? How do you not only live in the past? But you have to, I don't know, sit in your boat, and you have the future mind, the past mind, and you really should be well situated in the present. I think that would be something that would be great. And you're working on that, by the way. You're doing a great job with it. Thank you.
Columbine?
Mute myself and not be so big. This was kind of commenting on Vanessa's comment. It's funny because I would say my disappointment is that I don't have kids. And so it's kind of like a no-win situation, right? Because, and I think that's sort of what Buddhism gets at, is that, you know, life is suffering. And if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. You know, if you do have kids, you look at other people and you think, I'm not doing it the right way. If you don't have kids, you think, well, maybe I'm not getting something that everyone else has. But how can you be disappointed in something that you don't have? It's bizarre a little bit. You know, the other day I saw on The Guardian that it was a video of women saying why they didn't want to have kids. And I thought it was sort of a little bit strange that was even something that somebody had to say. I mean, for me personally, I don't think it's really, like, I haven't decided not to have kids. It's just that you can't have kids, you know, if you don't have a partner and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I just think it's odd to be disappointed in something that you've never experienced.
Yeah.
There's a quote from a song that I really like. I think it's Fiona Apple, and it's like, you know, love what you have and don't, you know, love what you don't have, or something to this degree. Like, why do we always reach towards something we don't have and not just sit with what we do have, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. You know, it is our minds compare, you know, or they're sort of designed, there's little comparison machines.
Yeah.
Who has more? So, you know, it takes an exercise to stay. Would you stop comparing already? You know, the food's getting cold. You know. Yeah. I think, yeah, using our minds in a different way, maybe. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for your talk today, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your great comments.
It was very relevant. Does anyone have any announcements?
There's the thing this Saturday, right?
Yes, I was gonna say that.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Hi.
So two announcements. This coming Saturday, we have a speaker as part of the series of Buddhism in Society. His name is Stephen Jackson. He's a friend of mine from my years in DC, and I was talking to him, and he said that, you know, he's African American, and he told me that the recent events in the country had a big impact on him, and he's finding a voice to speak about racism. And he welcomed the invitation to talk at Kannon. He really wants to talk about it and what's going on in his mind. So I hope you will be able to join us. It's on Saturday at 10 a.m., from 10 a.m. till 11:30 a.m. And the other announcement is next week, our guest speaker is Travis. Thank you.
Oh, Teresa, I should tell you this separately maybe, but I invited a couple of people from high school for Troy's talk, and they were incredibly, they were just so appreciative of it. So I just wanted to forward you those thanks. I sent him the talk from 2017 too, so everyone really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you. Well, if they wrote something to you, please send it to me and I will forward it to him.
Okay.
Thanks. It was a great talk.
Yeah.
And the way he interacted with everybody, it was really, really wonderful.
And if you missed it, it's on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
Plug. Any other, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Columbine. Any other announcements? Okay. If not, we will close with the 4 vows. And I just realized that I forgot and skipped the opening verse before your talk, Brenda, and I'm so disappointed. All right. Why don't we quickly go around and introduce ourselves? I'm going to unmute everyone, and you can just say your name. Oh, first of all, do we have any newcomers? I didn't see any newcomers today, but did I miss anyone? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't been
Oh,
around.
hi, Dawn.
Oh, you know me?
No, I can see your name. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I used to be involved at Cannondale long time ago, and after we moved to Rock Street for a while. But now I live far away, so I was lucky enough to get the Zoom connection in my email. So, yeah.
Nice.
Well, welcome. Great. Oh, and just a quick reminder that this session is recorded. So if anyone would like your question removed or you're not comfortable being on camera, please send me a chat message before you take off. And let's all introduce ourselves to Dawn.
Mahesh.
Hello, Don. Good to see you back.
Hi, Les. Yeah, nice to see your face.
Peter.
Greg.
I'm Nick. This is Tony.
Dave.
Megan.
Columbine.
Candy.
Brenda.
Teresa.
Neely.
Sorry, Neely.
Vanessa.
Umar and Lee.
May.
Eric.
Bonnie. Chris, did you introduce yourself? I didn't hear you. Hi, Chris. All right, I think I heard everyone else. All right, Mahesh, nice to see you, Mahesh.
Don, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Janet. I remember you from the old days.
Yes.
Great. Well, I think that's everyone. So thank you. Feel free to take off, or if you want to stay and hang on for a little bit and chat, you can hang on. But we are officially finished for the evening. Thank you, Brenda, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.